Hey everybody, Keith Hilson at the Trombone Shop at Schmidt Music. So, we know that over the past handful of years, S.E. Shires has been doing so much development in the trombone world. You know, they've come up with multiple different valve designs. They've been one of the early folks to do stuff with the cut detachable bell flare and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we were so lucky we were at ITF 2019 last week, and we were able to bring back a few Shires trombones with us, including this bass trombone here with dual Tru-Bore valves. So, just as a quick refresher, the Tru-Bore valve design means that when we're not activating the valves, the air just travels straight through here, and when we do move it, it's a very, very subtle kind of curving through, so very different design from other rotor designs. So, I'm going to take a quick play on this for you so you can hear this in action, and then we're going to talk about it. Since its inception, development a handful of years ago, the Tru-Bore valve from Shires has been one of the designs that's gotten a lot of attention, not only in the Shires design world, but kind of in the wider trombone world. So now there's certainly been a few different folks who have kind of used the same kind of approach here, but again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the whole concept here is that, you know, versus any other type of rotor valve or even axial flow, anything, where as the air is moving through the valve, we do have little movements. The air's got to kind of shift, you know, direction a little bit. Anytime we do that, we are subtly changing the resistance of it. The idea behind the Tru-Bore valve is that, again, when we're not activating the valve, it is literally a straight shot right through the valve. So it's as close to like a straight bass trombone as we're going to get with having valves on it. And then when we do activate the valve, you know, one of the things people like about this design, it's a shorter throw. I'd say this throw is about, you know, the same as a standard rotor is going to be. Definitely significantly shorter than, for example, an axial flow valve. And then we can see on the back side here, when we activate the valve, it kind of takes, it takes kind of twisting 90-degree turns through it as well. And they're, again, compared to especially a standard rotor, they're very soft curves. And so we're really, you know, eliminating a lot of that resistance that we might get, again, from especially a traditional rotor. But we're giving, frankly, I think in a lot of ways, even a little bit more openness than we might get even out of an axial flow to a certain extent because of how free-flowing this airflow is through the valve here. So this particular bass trombone is really kind of standard Shires setup. So this is the B2 taper, which is their most standard taper, in the 7YM gauge, so medium gauge, which is their standard on bass. The 7 is the standard modified two-piece soldered rim in yellow brass, and it has a standard B62 hand slide, so just a straight bore 562 yellow brass outer tubes, nickel silver crook, and then this particular one does have the B taper tuning slide on it. So with the Shires, they have two main bass trombone tuning slide tapers, B and C. The B is a little bit tighter, the C is a little bit more open. Because of the openness with the Tru-Bore here, I said, let's try balancing with the B taper and see what happens. So what I find about this setup compared to the axial flow is that I think it's more of a feel sound kind of thing there. I think in general, the sound is just a little bit more compact than I get with the axial flow, but in a nice way. It has a real presence, it has an energy, a projection with it, and I think it locks in really, really nicely. Now a little bit of that might be the B tuning slide, and I think I might play around with this a little bit more to find out for sure, but I think a lot of it, and having previous experience with the Tru-Bores, I think a lot of that is the valve. So it's just a little bit more focused, but again, especially on the open horn, it really locks in really nicely. And what I like about this a little bit different than the Tru-Bores on tenors, a lot of times with the Tru-Bores on tenors, for me, they're almost a little too open. I feel I'm a little uncomfortable with how much air I have to move with it. With these, it feels a little bit more natural. And whether it's just because we have the both valves lined up and we're providing just a little bit extra resistance, I'm not sure. But it is working better there. Now, where I do experience a little bit of a difference is in the trigger register. So as we're getting down into the single trigger and the double trigger, there is a little bit different push than with the axial flows. And there were certain times I found, especially with the excerpt, where I was jumping from, say, the open horn into like single or double valve combinations, where I did find myself having to shift my airflow a little bit more. Had to move a little bit more air, a little bit more to get the notes to really lock in. Now, what I do like about it is when I found that balance and got the air locking in, boy, it really slotted, and again, it had a really, really great energy to it. It felt it had a lot of that vibrancy we're looking for, but still had a nice core to it, and a little bit of that compactness, which was really, really nice. But I did have to shift things a little bit. The other thing I did notice is that in the upper range, I did feel it wasn't nearly as bad as we get with some bass trombones, where we lose a lot of the timbre of the sound. It gets kind of washed out and airy. Sometimes you have a hard time really getting things to center properly. This certainly didn't do that, but I did feel a little bit of a shift as well. So it's a very interesting valve design. I think it's something that it really has to fit the right person. I think it takes a certain air concept that really gets this kind of setup to work. And again, there's some certain things you can do. I can see this for the right player, maybe balancing some of that, putting on a little bit bigger, taper tuning slide here, or maybe, potentially on the player, maybe even trying like a dual bore hand slide, something like that. I think you can play around with some of that resistance stuff a little bit and find a really great fit. But again, the overall feel is fantastic. One thing I did want to mention is that for a lot of folks, the dual valve setup can be a little bit uncomfortable on the neck. We run into this sometimes with the axial flow valves because, of course, they have a little bit bigger profile. That is one of the things that I noticed with this. You can see, just looking at it, that because of the design of the valve, essentially half the valve is sitting off to each side of the main the neck pipe here. And so what happens is you do have a little bit more of this presence sitting on the neck. Now, it doesn't really bother me. For a second, I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I found a good balance, and it kind of ended up sitting right here on the G flat, the second valve, against my neck. But it is something to think about. Again, for some folks, they're very, very aware of that type of connection against the neck. And so this is one of those where you are going to have a little bit more presence on there as well. So just something to be aware of. But again, an awesome plain horn. I've never played a Shires trombone I didn't like, and this is another great example of that there. So I hope you enjoyed the review. If you have any experience with the Tru-Bore valves or any questions, thoughts, feel free to leave those below in the comments. If you like the video, think about giving it a thumbs up. If you haven't already done so, consider subscribing to our channel. We're always trying to create new, fresh content for you. And you can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for watching, everybody.